His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship His holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship His holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name.
And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name.
When the enemy surrounds and my heart grows fierce within, when the darkness overwhelms and my fears are pressing in, I will trust in you, oh Lord. In the silence I will wait. I will stand upon your word. You're my solid rock and my salvation, my steadfast hope that won't be shaken. My soul will wait, my soul will
The tunnel that goes under the English Channel, connecting France and England, is a modern-day masterpiece of engineering, an incredible thing. The tunnel had boring going on from both ends, and they had to try and meet in the middle, which in itself is incredible that they managed to do that. But it's even more incredible when you know the background to this thing called the Channel Tunnel, as it was called. Because the whole project had two departments. One was a finance department, basically, and the other was an engineering department. And both of these departments had English and French sub-departments. And so you can see the complexity of this whole thing beginning to take shape. It was a communications nightmare. One high-ranking executive said this: "The project created a lot of tension because it was not geared to solving problems, it was geared to placing blame. The English yelled at the French yelled at the English, and there were nervous breakdowns galore." And one of the main problems was they didn't have the same standards. They had different languages, for one thing. They had different accounting systems, for another thing. They had different electrical setups as well. The French ran on 380 volts, and the English ran on 420 volts. Instruction manuals had to be bilingual. There were two different standards about how to measure sea level. So the place was a complexity of different viewpoints and worldviews trying to come together harmoniously. The fact that they did is amazing, but there was a lot of collateral damage along the way. We're going to be going into a series called Privilege, Peace, and Purpose. It is a look through the book of Romans, which is the Apostle Paul's masterpiece of writing, and has long been considered that. But it's a masterpiece which addresses real-world problems. And one of the key issues that Paul is writing about in this letter to the Romans is the whole thing of different people getting along and getting along well. It's a whole lot more than that, but it's certainly no less than that. So Paul was writing to the church in Rome. Now, Rome at this time was obviously the most important city in the whole of the Roman Empire, which was simply enormous. The population of Rome at this time was around 1 million people, 50% slaves in the city of Rome, huge number of slaves. The city was incredibly cosmopolitan, and one of the cultures that made up the Roman reality in the city there were the Jewish community. Now, the Jews lived there in numbers and had done for some hundreds of years. There were twice as many Jews living in Rome as there were actually living back in Israel, around 40 to 60,000 of them. And they had enjoyed some special privilege and dispensation on certain things politically and religiously from the emperors Julius Caesar and Augustus. But even so, they were mostly poor people. They lived in the slums of Rome. They were of low social status, which in Rome was really important, the whole thing of status. Many of them were slaves or ex-slaves. And because of their differences, and because of the way they didn't buy into the multi-god approach of the Romans, they were disliked widely by a whole bunch of society, particularly the wealthy. And they in turn disliked them, the Romans, because of the way they served and worshipped multiple gods and so on. So that was Rome. What about the church, though, in Rome? Well, there wasn't actually a single church per se in Rome. What there was a collection of house churches. And Paul's greetings in chapter 16 of his letter that he writes to them, that's called Romans, shows us that there are at least 5 house churches meeting in the city of Rome. And they met in people's homes, in people's houses. And so we have the household of Priscilla and Aquila. We have the residence of Aristobulus, of Narcissus, of Asyncritus and Philologus and others. And there may have been a few more as well. Now, in the last chapter of Romans, where Paul greets these people, the names are really interesting. Some of them are aristocratic names, the names of wealthy people, and many of them are names that belong to the poor class of people. And so while there may have been one or two house churches that met in an actual home or a villa, probably most of them would have met in some place a lot like this, where they had these multi-story tenement buildings, I guess you'd say. Multi-story slum-level tenement buildings, quite small. And so a lot of the house churches would have been small as well. And so Paul was writing to these 5 or more house churches in Rome. But why? Why would he write? Well, he's writing from 1,200 kilometers away. He's living in Corinth, which is in Greece, and he's writing this letter. And it's not just a, hi, how are you going letter? It is a long letter. The letter of Romans is 10 times longer than the average length of letters from this day and age. So Paul obviously had some things he wanted to say. And he did have some pretty big issues he was addressing. What were they? Firstly, there was a crisis in the church. Now, Paul did not start the church in Rome. He started a whole bunch of other churches, but not the churches in Rome. We don't know how they started. There's a good chance they may have begun because of Jews who were back in Jerusalem for the Passover, who were there on the day of Pentecost and became followers of Christ because of that, and then came back home, back to Rome possibly. We don't know. But they were started by Jews, Jewish Christians. And because of that, the house churches in Rome initially were mainly Jewish Christian house churches, mainly Jews. But then a crisis happened. In AD 49, Emperor Claudius got angry and expelled a large number of Jews, or maybe all of them, from the city of Rome. And the reason that a historian called Suetonius tells us was that there was fighting, there was argy-bargy between Jews all about a single person. And the name of the person was Christus. And many experts think that Suetonius, the historian, misspelled the name Christos, Christ. And these Jews, presumably Christian Jews and Orthodox Jews, were coming to fisticuffs or blows and rioting around this person of Christ. And I can see that happening. It's not too hard to imagine because we see in so many other places in the New Testament how rioting happened because Jews believed in Jesus Christ and preached him. And so Claudius, the emperor, had enough of this, and he commanded the Jews, both parties, to leave the city. And in fact, in Acts 18 verse 2, we read that Aquila and Priscilla were exiles from Rome, kicked out by the emperor. There, it says, Paul met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. So imagine yourself in these house churches scattered around Rome, when suddenly most of the people in them who were Jews have had to leave the city. But the power, the momentum, the control of these house churches, small as they were, had been in the hands of the Jews, Jewish Christians, up until now. And now suddenly the only Christians who are left are the non-Jews, called the Gentiles. Those Christians. What is going to happen? Well, the non-Jewish Christians are going to take the reins, aren't they? They're going to start steering the ship, stepping into leadership, making calls, showing initiative, taking responsibility. And suddenly these house churches, which started out with a very Jewish flavor to them, have now developed a very non-Jewish flavor to them. Now fast forward 6 years. So Claudius expelled all the Jews in AD 49. Fast forward to 54, 5 years, and Emperor Claudius suddenly dies. And a young 17-year-old Emperor Nero takes control. And he cancels Claudius's commands, including the expulsion of the Jews. And so all these Jews now start to come back. All these Jewish Christians, presumably, come back to their house churches and find that things have changed drastically. The house churches they left are no longer the house churches that they've come back to. Jewish Christians saw Jesus as the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy and law and promises and hopes. But now the Torah is kind of neglected, disrespected in these house churches. These ones who used to be the leaders are now of less importance to the inner workings. What's going to happen? How's this going to play out? Do we get hints that the Jewish Christians are wanting to take things back to how things used to be? Absolutely we do. And there's talk in Romans of promoting circumcision and food laws and purity laws, all that stuff, which Paul is having to address. Are the non-Jews pushing back and trying to remove themselves, divorce themselves from Israel and that whole Old Covenant thing? Yeah, we read that in the book of Romans too. And Paul's corrective saying, no, you stand on the shoulders of the Old Testament Israel legacy. So Paul is using in his letter very strong language to describe the argy-bargy that is going on in these home groups, these house groups, these house churches. He's describing it as a places of dissension, of places of offense, of Christian against Christian. He's describing people actively promoting division amongst these house churches. Romans 16 verse 17 is one of those references. Now Paul writes 3 years thereabouts after all these Jews get to come back to the city. And he's writing to house churches which are now a mixture of both Jews and non-Jews. Diversity has exploded, economic diversity. We read names of common slaves. We read names of aristocrats. There's ethnic diversity. The names we read are of Greek origin and of Jewish origin and of Latin origin. There's a diversity in leadership. Fully 1/3 of the names that Paul says and mentions in his greetings in chapter 16 are women who are in positions of leadership. So there's gender diversity in terms of the leadership roles. And throw into all of this big fight and disagreement about the place of Jewishness in the legacy of the Christian faith. So what does Paul say to them? He says, basically, come on guys, you need to have a right response to each other. And in chapters 14 and 15, he says, accept each other. Tolerate each other's differences. And in chapters 1 to 13, he lays the groundwork for that call to live rightly. And he describes how both Jews and non-Jews are equally in need. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You both have, he's saying. But Christ has broken down the walls of hostility between people to make a new people who are inclusive and one in Christ. So that is one of the big themes that Paul is trying to address in this letter. The second theme that he's trying to address is he's on a recruitment drive, you know. We're kind of in the middle of the lead up to the Auckland mayoralty elections, and you see all the placards around the place of all the faces who are putting their names into the ring. Recruiting our vote, recruiting our investment in their promises and so on. Well, Paul, in the letter of Romans, is on a little bit of a recruiting drive as well, because he's wanting support. Paul has finished his work, his missionary work in the Eastern Mediterranean. And he's now wanting to go to Spain to share Jesus there. It's like a natural breakpoint in his ministry. He says in verse 20 of chapter 15, "It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundations." And a few verses later he says, "But now that there is no more place for me to work in these regions, and since I have been longing for many years to visit you in Rome, I plan to do so when I go to Spain. I hope to see you while passing through, and to have you assist me on my journey there after I have enjoyed your company for a while." So he's writing to them saying, "Look, I'm on my way to Spain, but I want to stop off and get your support, because Rome was a great launching pad into Spain, into the West. It was the closest church to the West there. And he probably needed finance, he needed prayer, he may have needed contacts of people in Spain that he could get in touch with. But he describes firstly how he's going to go back to Jerusalem, and he's going to deliver a contribution of money to the impoverished church, the Jewish church back in Jerusalem. Verse 25 and 28 of chapter 15. "Now, however, I am on my way to Jerusalem in the service of the Lord's people there, for Macedonia and Achaia were pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the Lord's people in Jerusalem. They were pleased to do it, and indeed they owe it to them. For if the Gentiles, the non-Jews, have shared in the Jews' spiritual blessings, they owe it to the Jews to share with them their material blessings. So after I have completed this task and have made sure that they have received this contribution, I will go to Spain and visit you on the way." And so, and other letters too that he writes, Paul also talks about this collection of money. 1 Corinthians 16, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 as well. Both written around the same time as Romans is written. Now, I don't know about you, but often I have this image of Paul as being this insanely courageous, miracle-working, adventurous, Energizer Bunny kind of a Christian, you know? Free from fear, you know, taking on the world. But he wasn't. He was deeply worried. He was deeply fearful of his trip to Jerusalem with this money. He was fearful that his enemies back in Jerusalem, of which there were many, would harm him. He speaks about them in Romans 15, verse 31. And he was worried that the donation of money to the Jerusalem church would not be accepted by these Jews. They'd be rejecting the donations, and that would further divide the church of Christ. And so he asks for these Christians in Rome to pray for him in Romans 15:30. And he recruits them into this mission that he's on to Jerusalem, even if only with their prayer. Because for Paul, this collection of money is a visible symbol of the very thing he's been writing to the Romans about. That it doesn't matter what ethnicity we are one in Christ Jesus. Okay? So that is just a bit of a background to the letter of Romans. It is an amazing piece of literature, incredible thing. It speaks to us even today. It speaks to us about issues of privilege and power and the whole power dynamic. How do we handle these in Christian community? It speaks about peace. How do we handle differences in such a way that peace is promoted and guarded? And it speaks about the way that the peace deconstructs privilege and power. Commentator Scott McKnight says this: from beginning to end of this letter, or perhaps from end to beginning, the letter deconstructs privilege and power and replaces it with peace. And thirdly, it speaks to us about purpose, How well are our lives shaped by the radical culture embracing, but also countercultural purposes that believers have in community to together witness to the amazing, breathtaking, astounding news that God sent his Son to rescue us. How do we shape our lives around that purpose? So, beloved, that is an introduction to the book of Romans, which we'll be in for a little while. It's an amazing journey ahead of us. I encourage you to read ahead, and we're going to dive into it next week. God bless you.